My name is Dr. Kevin Pecca. I wanted to make a podcast that exposes people to the true miracles of life and health. All the guests on this show have been specially picked because they bring something positive to the world. They have some of the most amazing and inspiring life stories. These people have a passion for living, healing, and leaving the world better than they found it. There is something inside these people that made them keep fighting through all the tough times, even when people told them it was not possible. They carried on and made their lives beautiful again. And now they are sharing their experiences with the world. This is the Expect Miracles podcast. Enjoy the show. Today on the podcast, we have Christopher Moynihan. Chris is an actor, writer, and producer out in Los Angeles, California. He has been in some major motion pictures such as For Your Consideration and A Mighty Wind. Chris has also made guest appearances on HBO shows such as Veep and Hello Ladies. He has also created, written, produced, and acted in multiple television shows on ABC and NBC. Chris has an upcoming television show on NBC called Marlin, written for Marlin Wayans, that airs August 16th, 2017, which I'm extremely excited to see. But most importantly, Chris has an amazing life story that I'm sure was very difficult at times to achieve his lifelong dream of becoming an actor and a writer. I am honored to call Chris Moynihan my cousin, and I'm very excited to hear about his entire life story. Please welcome Christopher Moynihan.
We're doing my entire life story, huh?
We're going from the beginning.
Oh, Jesus Christ. April 1st, 1973.
So you were born April 1st, 1973?
Yup.
Where were you born?
I was born in Syosset, Long Island.
So you grew up in Long Island. How was that?
It was awesome. I loved growing up in Long Island, yeah. You were in Jersey.
I was in Jersey.
So, because we had the tri-state area of cousins there. We had a lot of us in Long Island, the Moynihans and the Truncones upstate. Pecca's in Jersey and the Ruffinos in Jersey, yeah.
Absolutely.
But it was cool. I loved Long Island. I loved blue collar. I liked growing up with very little. I think it helped me kind of gain an appreciation for things.
Also, yeah, and you had those four crazy brothers of yours running around all the time.
I had four brothers. We had a very Lord of the Flies upbringing. There was quite a lot of, let's go out and shoot arrows in the air and see if they hit us, and let's light fires and see how big we can get before we put them out. We were truly out of our minds.
Absolutely. So, Chris, what were you into as a kid?
When I was little, it makes me sound like a very old man, but there was so little distraction as a kid that we were very much into being outside, climbing trees, building forts. We grew up out in Suffolk County, Long Island, up against miles worth of woods and abandoned vacant lots with broken down cars and furniture and crazy shit everywhere. So that's all we did. We ran around breaking windows and broken down cars and climbing trees and building forts. And truly, it was absolute freedom. It was total freedom for us.
Yeah, definitely. So at a young age, did you know you've always wanted to become an actor? How did you dive into that?
I think I always craved a lot of attention as a kid. I had two older brothers, two younger brothers. So I was technically middle child. My younger brothers are twins, but I was kind of in the middle of this crowd trying to make enough noise to get noticed, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that was the early part of my life. But when I got into high school, when I was in about 9th grade, I wanted to be in a play that I saw. There was a local theater group called Kids for Kids in Long Island. I don't know if it's still there, actually, but it was called Kids for Kids because it was produced by kids and it starred kids. So everybody associated with the production, with the exception of the director, and I think maybe like the lighting director or something, everybody was a child. You had to be in high school. I auditioned for Grease when I was 14, and I actually got a part in Grease, and I turned it down. And I remember my mother asking me why I turned it down, and I couldn't quite answer. I was just like, I just don't want to do it.
Yeah.
And then a year later, I auditioned for something else. It was like Joseph in the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat or something, some musical. It was Joseph. And I got in it, and immediately I was like, this is what I want to do. And quite frankly, because I was I got a lot of attention for it, I think I was, as 15-year-old Long Island kids go, I think I was relatively good at it. And so I got a lot of positive attention for it. And I was a terrible student, so my mother used it as a leverage to get me to get good grades, because she'd say if you can't get above a C, which is a pretty low bar, but it was high for me, then you can't be in plays. And then so from that on, from I think 11th and 12th grade, that's all I did was I just wanted to be in plays.
I remember your dad saying, you used to come from school and he'd be like, Chris, how's school going? And he'd be like, Dad, I'm doing great. Everything's going well. And then by the time the report card came out, like, Chris, what the hell's going on? And he'd be like, you know what, Dad, I have no idea what's going on. I'm going to get to the bottom of this, though.
I would pretend as though there was something amiss. And I would say to my dad, I don't want you to worry yourself about this. I'll get down to the bottom. What the hell is this? Miss Tamaris said that I was going to get a B. This is a mistake, Dad. This has got to be a mistake. And I was really I was a sociopath because I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't doing homework. I wasn't paying attention to anything. So it was kind of great for my mother because once I said I had something I wanted, because she'd be like, you're not allowed to go out. I'm going to lock you in your room. And I was like, okay, because I love music. I could just sit around listening to Billy Joel and Bruce Springsteen and Elton John.
Billy, yeah.
So I would just do that instead of going out. My mother would eventually take away my music, and it still wouldn't have an effect on me until she said, you can't be in plays.
And that's when it hit, yeah.
That's when it hit, yeah. And then I kind of breezed through the rest of high school.
What did you want to do after high school?
I knew I wasn't going to go to college just because I was a terrible student. So I kind of had it in my brain. I think if there's, looking back on my life, I wish I had just been a little bit more informed about anything. I really, truly felt like I had this insane amount of confidence that I would just say, all right, I'll just become an actor. Because I've done 3-4 plays in high school, I feel like, I'm fit for anything. I'm capable of anything. And so I was like, I'll just become an actor. I'll just become a star. Honestly, it was that simple in my brain. And reality was that it's it's an almost impossible thing to do, is to become a successful artist in any way. But when I got out of high school, I was teaching piano because I had picked up piano on my own in high school. And I got relatively good. I got okay pretty quickly, so I started teaching little kids with this company on Long Island, and then I was like, I'll just go to New York and audition for shows until I get something. I went to New York, this has got to be 1992. I took a train into Manhattan from Long Island, and I auditioned for what I thought was a cruise ship. And it turned out I didn't even read the casting list right. It was for Hershey Park in Pennsylvania.
Yes, I want to hear about this so bad, yeah.
And I went into this audition for a guy named Alan Albert. He was a producer at the time. He would produce theme park type shows. And I auditioned. I sang a song. To quote my old man, you couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, and now you're doing all these musicals. And I was a bad singer. And I sang, and this guy was just kind of okay, well, let me hear another song. And I was like, oh, well, I don't have another song. I only prepared one song. And he said, I didn't bring any more sheet music. And he said, well, then I guess you can't. I guess you're done. And I said, well, I'll accompany myself on the piano. So I played a song from the musical Godspell on the piano. I played a song called We Beseech Thee, and I sang it. And this is the first and only audition I ever went on in New York. And the guy said,
any acting lessons at this point?
No.
Singing? Nothing? Wow.
Nothing. I just did I did 4 plays in high school. That's it.
Yeah. Perfect. And what did he say?
6 plays. He said, he told me to leave the room. He said, could you leave the room for a second? And I said, yeah. And then they asked me to come back in, and he said, do you think you could play piano like that 5 times a day? And I said, sure, absolutely. And he said, all right, well, do you want to work at Hershey Park? And I went, sure. And I actually said, I thought this was for a cruise ship. And he said, no, I don't know where you got that idea. So I said, yeah. And I remember they gave me a contract. It was $322 a week, which boggled my mind. And they said, just be in Hershey, Pennsylvania on June 20th. And then I went home, and for the next 4 weeks, I kind of packed up my life. And I got in a car that Uncle Tom gave me.
Yep.
Uncle Tom gave me a car.
Uncle Tom is the best.
Our Uncle Tom is the best. We have so many good people in our family, but Uncle Tom gave me a car. He gave all of us cars. He would just breeze through a car and give it to one of us, and we would destroy it. But he gave me a Dodge Aries. It was in really good shape. It was a little station wagon, and I packed it up, and I drove it to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and I had to play piano in this pasta house show 5 times a day, and I was not a piano player, but I kind of winged it, and I got by. Everybody was happy with what I was doing. And then I met a guy named Louis Goldberg. Louis didn't quite like me when he met me because I was very loud. I was very in your face, and I was very positive, and I was obnoxious. And Louis was this kind of very reserved guy from Princeton, New Jersey. And he was like, I didn't think Louis liked me the whole summer, and I would play 5 times a day in the Pasta House in Hershey Park, and I would play this America medley. And then Louis asked me if he I used to, it's stupid, but I used to play at a piano bar called Buddy D's at night. And I was playing in the piano bar, and Louis came in, and I hadn't spoken to Louis in weeks because he was the musical director of the show. And like I said, I don't think he liked me. And he sat down at the piano bar next to me, and he said, I am going to be the musical director on the European tour of Cabaret. I need an assistant. Would you come with me? And I said, Louis, I didn't think you liked me. And he said, I find you very obnoxious. He said, but there is a positive quality about you that I like. And I said, okay. And then he said, we'd be leaving in September. It was crazy. I finished this first year at Hershey in September, and then I think it was late September, we were in New York, and then October 6th or something, we flew to Hanover, Germany, and I was the assistant I was just playing keyboard parts and stuff because I couldn't read music very well.
How old are you, 19, 20?
I was 20. I had just turned 20.
That's amazing where life will take you.
It was crazy. And like I said, I was not a very good piano player, but I kind of had an instinct that I think Lewis appreciated. And so he hired me to simply do, like in the musical Cabaret, they couldn't afford an entire orchestra. They can't afford an accordion player, and they can't afford a strings player, and they can't afford a string quartet. So they basically, he gave me a keyboard, and I would just play all these supplemental parts that would fill out the arrangements in Cabaret. But when we got to Europe, the plan was I would accompany the singers on the piano and Lewis would play for the dancers. I don't know if you know Cabaret. I may be going into too much detail in the story. But ultimately, the director, this guy named Jeffrey Dunn, said, I want Lewis with the singers and I want Chris with the dancers. And I couldn't play the piano well enough to be with the dancers. And so Lewis said, well, that's not the way Chris is built. He's kind of like more an accompanied piano player. He's not really And the guy said, I don't care. If he doesn't play it, he's fired. And so Lewis came to me and said, you have to learn these songs and play them for the dancers. And Kevin, it was probably the most stressful week of my life because I would
You had one week to do it?
I had one night to do it because we'd be rehearsing Willkommen on Tuesday. So Monday night I would stay up till 2 a.m. learning it for the next day. And I did that and I managed to get through it and I managed to figure it out. And then ultimately once the show started, I was just playing all these like keyboard parts. But anyway, I digress. Ultimately I did 6 months in Europe. 7 months, 8 months, something like that, on the European tour Cabaret. I turned 21, and then I came back, and I did one more summer in Hershey Park, because they just called and offered me another job, and I was doing like comedy. I wasn't playing piano there, I was doing comedy, and I was juggling. And then...
How did you teach yourself how to juggle, too? Was that just
Yeah, because I was at Hershey Park the year before, and I was like playing piano in this show, and I met these guys. I'm boring the shit out of your podcast listeners. But ultimately, I learned from a couple of guys who were there. So I did like one more summer at Hershey Park. I met a guy named Bryson Lang, and he was planning on moving to L.A. I was planning on moving to L.A. And so we were like, all right, so when this thing's over, let's move to Los Angeles. And I think I did one more Christmas show at Hershey. Like that whole year of 94, when I got back from Europe, I just worked a bunch of shows at Hershey Park. And then in January 95, we drove out from Long Island to California to L.A., and I think I went and did a musical theater tour for a few months right after I moved out here. But then in June of 95, I was in LA. I was 22.
That's something I think everybody should do, road tripping across the country at least once.
Oh, yeah. It's
That's
fantastic.
Yeah.
It was great because we had no money, and it was like we were just
That's
winging
the way
it.
to do it. Yeah, that's the way to do it. So that must have been a struggle getting to L.A. Like, did you guys have anywhere to live? Or
Yes, because Bryson had come out. Like I said, we came out. I was doing a show 6 months earlier, and Bryson came out and got an apartment. So we knew we had an apartment, and then while I was on this musical theater tour in early 95, I was like just doing this shitty tour around the East Coast. He got a job for the summer of 95 playing juggling in Six Flags, Magic Mountain, north of LA. And so we knew we had a job come, I think, June of that year. And so we were making an insane 2.5-hour drive every day to get to Six Flags, but we were outside the Batman stunt show. We were just juggling, passing clubs and like doing comedy stuff. So me and Bryson, who's still one of my best friends, he lives in Boston now, but we spent that summer of 95, like we would do comedy clubs and we would perform on the Santa Monica Promenade and we would just juggle. We were like a juggling duo and we were...
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. And we could like do that throughout our summers and make enough money to kind of coast through the winters with like a waiting tables job or something. We had very little money. My rent was like $271 a month. It was insanely low.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did that in 95, and then like I worked at Six Flags for 3 years, 95, 96, 97.
3 years, huh?
3 years in a row. Like it was great, because like I said, we could do the whole summer. We'd make enough money to coast through the winters, and we were just having a blast. Like I had the greatest friends, and we lived in Santa Clarita. We weren't even down in LA. But ultimately, to cut to the quick about how I got into television is that I was doing that shit up north at Six Flags just to pay bills, and my friend Heath Heitch, who I had met at Hershey Park the first summer I went there when I was playing piano. He moved to LA because he was a stand-up comic who had a very big career at the time. He was just starting his career. And he flew out on a whim to meet with Roseanne Barr to do this sketch comedy show called Saturday Night Special. It was going to be going up against Saturday Night Live. And it lasted I think 6 episodes they did, maybe 10. But it had a great cast. It had Kathy Griffin, Jennifer Coolidge, Laura Keitlinger was on it, and so Heath was there, and I just started going down and hanging out with him on that set. And then, but again, I was still waiting tables, I was on unemployment, I was just kind of breezing through my life, not kind of pointlessly, I had no real drive. And then he got on a TV series on ABC CBS called Style and Substance. So he was a series regular on a network sitcom, and it kind of blew all of our minds, none of us had ever even come close to doing anything on television. And Heath was instrumental. Heath took my headshot and he went right to Mark Hirschfeld, who was the head of casting who was just the casting director on that at the time. And he gave him my headshot and he said, like, you should meet this guy. And he gave him my headshot and I auditioned for them. And the guy was like, we're going to give the role to someone else, but you're really good. And I was like, oh, I appreciate that. And then like 6 months later, Mark Hirschfeld called me in for a show called Jenny McCarthy Show. Jenny McCarthy did a series on NBC. And I auditioned for it. I got this job on the Jenny McCarthy Show. I did one episode of that. I got Taft-Hartley'd into the union, which means if you have to get into the Screen Actors Guild, Taft-Hartley means that you bypass all of the bullshit of having to try and get in. If you get a job before you're in the union, you just pay your dues and you're in the union. So I did that. Jenny McCarthy got me into the union. And then Mark Hirschfeld called me in for a show called Gary and Mike. It was an animated series. It's still all over YouTube. Like, people watch it on YouTube because it was on, I think we aired on Comedy Central, but it was on Fox at the time we did it. And it was like they read a lot of comics and actors in LA, and it came down to me and a guy named Marlin Wayans. I was Gary and he was Mike, and we did 13 episodes of that. And with that, I went to an agent. Because I went to an agent with a contract. I said, I need an agent to negotiate this contract for me on Gary and Mike. I met a guy named Bruce Smith at Omnipop, and I did 13 episodes of that. With Bryan Cranston was like one of the other roles. He did one of the other voices on the show. Nicest guy in the world. Like, in the same year he did the Malcolm in the Middle pilot. So it's like, it was really cool. So we did 13 of those, and then like, I kind of got my foot in the door with casting directors because I was on this animated show. And then that first pilot season, I got this pilot called The Fighting Fitzgeralds with Brian Dennehy, created by Edward Burns and his brother Brian.
I remember that one, yeah.
Yeah, and it was great. And then I was on that, and then from there on out, it kind of I started working. I was doing a lot of commercials at the time, too, so it was like, I could afford my life. I was finally making money, real money that was like, I didn't have to work a day job.
When did you first step foot on a movie set?
The first movie I ever did was A Mighty Wind. I was doing commercials in the late 90s, and in 1998, while I had done the Jenny McCarthy Show and I was recording Gary and Mike, that first season of Gary and Mike, I just got a bunch of commercials, which was great because it would pay pretty well for a guy who was used to paying $271 a month in rent. I could live on very little. And then so I met Christopher Guest on a Bass Ale commercial in 1998, and he really was great to me. Christopher Guest liked me a lot. So that whole time, like 98, 99, 2000, 2001, I think I did like 6 or 7 commercials with Chris, or 5 or 6 commercials where I'd have to go to the audition, and I would go in and audition because that's what they make you do. And Chris would just say to the producers, he's like, this is the guy, because he was directing them. He'd say, this is the guy I want to use. He found Jane Lynch that way. He found Don Lake. Like, he met all of us through this commercial world. And then, so in like 2001, end of 2001, we were doing a Dockers ad for the Super Bowl. And it was me and a guy named Don Lake and a guy named Joel McCrary. And we were all dressed in black dresses at this, like all the men in this wedding were dressed in black dresses. And Joel McHale was dressed in Dockers. So he was the only guy in this entire party that was dressed in Dockers. That was the whole point. It's like, if you're not wearing Dockers, you may as well be wearing a black dress or whatever it was. It aired during the Super Bowl. And I met Joel McHale and Don Lake then. And while we were doing that commercial, Chris Guest pulled me aside and said, listen, we're doing a movie called A Mighty Wind. Me and Gene Levy wrote a role for you in it. Would you like to do it? And I said, yeah, sure. And he said, great. We'll just reach out and we'll do it. And then like March of 2002, it's like 6 months later, I went and we did A Mighty Wind. Like, we did all the live music.
So was that intimidating, being on a major motion picture set, or? Yeah,
I mean, the thing is, like I said, I'd done a bunch of commercials with Christopher Guest, so I knew the way he worked, that all of his movies is improvised. Like, everything is improvised. So he gives you kind of a framework for what you're going to be doing, but you just kind of say whatever you want. So I knew that, great. So I did, and I had done a bunch of commercials with him. That's why he kind of liked me, because I guess I was kind of pretty quick on my feet. And so with A Mighty Wind, I didn't have a huge part, but we did all this live music, which was all of the music in the movie was us playing live in the moment. And so I had a few scenes in that movie with Michael Higgins and stuff, and you know what, it wasn't intimidating because it's such a small group. I mean, I was kind of separate from Gene Levy and Catherine O'Hara and Chris and Michael McKean. Like, we were in our own little group. So I was working with John Michael Higgins, I think he's one of the best actors in town. Like, he's funny and he's one of my closest friends. But so with him, I felt like we got along very well. So there was no intimidation there. And we had a great time doing the movie. And then we went and did like a 9-city tour with that show. Like, we played Town Hall in Manhattan, and we played Vancouver, and we played Philadelphia, and LA, and we did like a whole concert from the end of Mighty Wind. So that was awesome. The only time that I had a moment of like intimidation on it was then 2 years later we did For Your Consideration. And Christopher Guest and Gene Levy wrote me a much bigger part in that. And my first day of shooting was a scene with Chris where he's a director and I'm an actor asking him questions. And so like, and I was like, I had come up on Spinal Tap and Waiting for Guffman, Best in Show. Like I was obsessed with those movies long before I met him. So the first day on For Your Consideration was me and Chris Guest, and he was like, we get an outline of the scene, and then he sets up the cameras and he goes, all right, you ready? And I go, yeah. And he goes, go. And then, and I'm sitting there like surreal, like I'm standing here with Chris Guest. I'm like, it kind of blew my mind a little bit. And we did a bunch of takes and we made each other laugh. And I was like, it's kind of like, it's a dream come true for me because honestly, if there's anybody in this town who's anybody's comedic opinion I respect more than Chris Guest, I don't know who it is.
Do you like working better like that with the improv, or would you rather follow like a script?
I don't know if I have a preference either way. I mean, the only movies I've done 3 movies, and they've all been Christopher Guest movies. It's a very strange world out here. It's very hard for television actors to make the jump to movies. It's very easy for a movie actor to come to television, but Kathleen, my wife, or my girlfriend of 17 years, she's done it. She's done big movies with David Fincher, and she also does television, but she casts a very wide net. I was very specific in what I did. If it was the guy that I play, which is that kind of like little off, kind of nerdy white guy, I was pretty hard to beat for it, but I didn't do much other stuff. So no, to answer your question, I think, because I've done other scripted shows that I really liked being on. I loved being on Fighting Fitzgerald's, and I wasn't a writer there. Like, I would just say what was told to say.
So, Chris, how much time would you say has went by since you got to LA until you kind of feel like you made it? Because I feel like a lot of people, they get out there with a lot of passion, I'm going to be an actor and everything, and then they hit a wall and they're like, you know what? This isn't for me. I'm done. Did you ever have that moment and you're like, you know what? This really isn't working out. I should stop and go back home, or just stop in general?
No, I never had that. I mean, the first part of your question, though, like, when did I think I made it? No, and I haven't made it. Make it is a strange term that people have in their brains, but I feel like for me, making it was I can be creative and be paid and sustain a life by having a creative endeavor. That to me is making it. But no, to answer the second part of your question, I never had a moment where I was going to give up or bail out.
Because there was definitely some tough times in that.
No doubt.
Stretch, yeah.
Most of my 20s, and a good chunk of my 30s, I was unemployed. Money is good when you make money on television, but I would do a series and I'd go, great, this can get me through the next couple of years. And sometimes I would watch it all dwindle. I would watch my savings go away because it's very hard to work as an actor. I did work pretty steadily, so there was never a time where I was like, oh, this really, I got to bail on this. Yeah. Mostly because I had nothing to bail to. I had never done anything else. I taught piano, and I guess I could go do that, but I didn't have any other skill set. I guess I could swing a hammer. I came from a place where
your brothers are talented at that, man.
Yeah, my 4 brothers are amazing. They really are. I never felt like I was going to give up on it.
So,
to answer your question real quick, from the time I started working, I moved in 95. I started working pretty regularly in 98. So I was about 3 years here.
That's still a good chunk of time.
Oh, yeah.
Just hanging, yeah.
When you're approaching 30 or your mid-20s, it seems like forever.
Definitely, yeah. So when did the writing come in the picture?
So I did the movie with Chris, and I did a bunch of commercials with him, and then I did Fighting Fitzgerald's, and then in 2002, I was recurring on this show called The Hughleys, D.L. Hughley, and I was recurring on a show called According to Jim with Jim Belushi. So I was like making money, and I was like pretty stable, and I was saving money, and I was doing pretty well. And then in 2002, after A Mighty Wind, I bought a house in Highland Park, California. It was the best decision I ever made. It was John Michael Higgins actually kind of forced me to make that decision. So I bought a house in late 2002, and then 2003 was coming up. And as soon as I bought the house, I realized now I have a mortgage that was double my previous rent. So I started realizing that I had very little control over my income. It's like, if somebody calls with the right job at the right time and the right audition, then I'm going to be fine. But if nobody does, then I'm going to have a house that I have to pay for. And so at the end of 2002, I just sat down in my brand new house alone to write. I wanted to write a pilot. I didn't know anything about it, but I knew that all of the stuff I'd said on Christopher Guest sets, I had made up in my head anyway. So I essentially was writing. I just wasn't bringing pen to paper necessarily. So I wrote this pilot called Foster Hall just as a way to do something that I can control. And I gave it to my manager, who I had just started working with, this guy named Ron West, who's still my manager and my producing partner to this day. And Ron read it, and this is like early 2003, because the first 4 months of your year are pilot season. That's when you're auditioning for pilots. And I always tested for a lot of pilots. I always did pretty well in those days, but I didn't always get a pilot. And so in 2002, I didn't get a pilot, and I bought a house. So 2003, I was like, I better do something. So I wrote that pilot. I gave it to Ron at the beginning of 2003. And he was like, it's very funny, but there's no real pilot here. But it's very funny. Like, it really made me laugh. So he's like, well, we'll figure out something to do with it. So then at the end of that pilot season, in 2003, I got Coupling, which was this American adaptation of a British series loosely based on Friends. Like it was the British version of Friends, created by a guy named Stephen Moffat, who is a genius. He went on to create Sherlock, and he kind of revamped Doctor Who. The guy's a genius, and he was a lovely guy. And he did a great series in England, and it was people always say it was the British Coupling, and I don't think I should categorize it like that because it was a really, really unique show. NBC bought it, hoping to replace Friends with it, and I got cast in that. And so Friends went off the air, and while we were shooting Coupling, when you're a series regular on a TV show, the network will be very kind to you and very generous with their time, and they'll bend over backwards for you. And then the moment the show gets canceled,
they're gone, yeah.
They're gone. You're not allowed on the lot. Literally, you're not allowed to drive on the lot whenever you want. So wow. I said to my manager, I said, while I'm here, because I had been on a series at NBC 2 years prior and it didn't last, and I was not convinced that this was going to be the next Friends. And so I said, let me take a meeting with the development department at NBC, because I had written the script called Foster Hall. And Ron called these development execs and said, Moynihan has an idea, he wants to pitch it to you. And honestly, every actor has an idea, and I'm sure they rolled their eyes and were like, this is a waste of our fucking time. But I made Ron say, I said, there's a caveat to this request, which is, if it's bad, I want to know why it's bad. If it's the worst thing you've ever heard, just tell me why it's the worst thing you've ever heard.
Wow, that's great.
Because if you just say it's good and you're kind and you walk away, then I get nothing out of it. I just want to know how to write. And there's a guy named Fief Sutton, Fief Sutton was the executive producer of Cheers. And Fief was the showrunner on both The Fighting Fitzgeralds and Coupling. So I had become friendly with Fief. And I remember the night we shot the Coupling pilot, we were walking to our cars, and Fief arbitrarily out of nowhere said to me, I think you'd be a very good writer. You should write. And that was right as I had been actually coincidentally working on Foster Hall, or I had just written Foster Hall. So I had kind of had this ambition, and Fief was the one who really kind of gave me a little bit of confidence to believe that I might be good at it. And so I went to NBC and I pitched it. And I even said at the top of the meeting, if this is terrible, just tell me why it's terrible. I just want to get better. That's the only thing I want. And so I pitched them this show called Foster Hall about two kids who grew up in the foster system and they never had a family. So they're like twin siblings who kind of had a very unhealthy attachment to each other. And so I pitched it and I could see that they were like, oh, that's pretty interesting. And I said, yeah, you know what? I've actually already written it. It's 46 pages long, but here, just so you can hear the voices in my head, I left the script for them. I was still shooting Coupling at the time. And then I gave them the script, and then a week later, I was on the set of Coupling, and my cell phone rang, and it was Kevin Riley, who was the new head of NBC. He had just taken over NBC, and he had read Foster Hall. And he said, I love this. I think it's fantastic. And Conan O'Brien loves it, because Conan had an overall deal there. And they said, we want to do it. And a week later, Coupling was canceled. Coincidentally, on a personal note, it was the same week that Uncle George died. And so I went back to New York for Uncle George's funeral, I think. And then 3 days later, I was in New York with Conan. I met with Conan. He wanted to produce this pilot. And so Coupling was done. This is October. And so for November, December, I rewrite Foster Hall with the notes from the network. And Conan is my non-writing EP. And then in January...
What was it like working with Conan?
Conan he's awesome. He's a wonderful guy. He was in New York doing his show every day. I was in LA, so we would get on the phone every 3 weeks and he would give me his thoughts on the script. So we didn't work very, very closely. When we shot the pilot, he was there for the week, and he's Conan. He's amazing.
Yeah,
he's funny and he's kind, and I couldn't ask for anything more in a producer. And he protected me. He really said, if you bring in some other showrunner that's going to write this, it's going to lose the thing that we all love about it. So let Moynihan do it by himself, which was nice. I think he also got me EP credit on my first pilot, which most people wouldn't have had. So I was an EP on my pilot. That's an executive producer for whatever that means in this town. So they passed on the pilot, ultimately. We shot it, and they passed on it. They didn't want it. And I was like, okay, great. Well, now I'm in the room. I'm a writer now.
Yeah. I mean, and that happens all the time, right? Like, pilot comes out, they either take it or not. Did you take that personal, or?
No, not at all. Look, I had been associated with so much rejection as an actor. It's all you do is rejection. Rejection was my stock and trade. It's what I did. Of 100 auditions I went to, 99 said he's not good, and one of them said, yeah, we'll use him. So, no, I didn't take it personally at all. And more importantly, like the staggering number of things that don't make it. Like, you may as well be buying a scratch-off lottery ticket, because I think the statistics from one year that I got a show in the air was that ABC bought 75 scripts, they shot 10 pilots, and they picked up 2 shows. So it's like, those are the numbers you're up against. So when things don't work out, yeah, it kind of sucks because you'd like to continue with the show, but ultimately, you're in the majority at that point.
Right. So they passed on that, and then did you just get the ball rolling with more
scripts?
No,
you know what's funny is I thought, okay, well now I've written a script, I've shot my first pilot, this is a slam dunk, now I'm a writer. And the truth is, I really had absolutely no idea what I was doing. I got very lucky with my first script because Kevin Riley had an eye for voices. He knew that, okay, this doesn't sound like anything else. Moynihan's funny and he's got a good voice, but ultimately, I didn't know anything about story, I didn't know anything about character, I didn't know anything about drive, I didn't know anything.
Are you just following your gut at this point? Because, you don't really know how to do... For most of the story, you didn't know how to act. You picked up music. What is
You're right. It's probably the biggest regret that I have in my life and in my creative endeavors. And I don't have many regrets. And I say it with the caveat that it's not a huge regret. But I didn't ever learn the way things are supposed to go. The term I stumbled across 10 years ago was autodidact.
Autodidact?
An autodidact. Self-taught. And it was from the time, when I wanted to play piano, and I got pretty good at piano. When I wanted to play piano, I didn't go take piano lessons. I sat at a piano for hours, painstakingly plunking away at shit, and it was the long way around. I don't know why I didn't go do it properly. I play guitar. I'm pretty good at guitar. I just sat in, my roommate Bryson had a guitar, so I would sit at the foot of his bed playing his guitar and saying, where do my fingers go to make this? How do I do this? And people would show me, and then I'd have to do it on my own. I don't know. So to answer your question, yes, I was winging it. I winged everything. And it sucked because I think had I not winged things, I could have, God, who knows what I could have been if I had actually done it the way most people do it.
Yeah, I think a lot of people do research things a little too much and they figure out, oh, this is going to be a lot. I don't think I can do it. And then it might kill a dream. And your way might be way more effective.
I would
just
not
going for it.
Maybe, but I would not recommend my way to anybody starting out. Really, I would say, as I'm writing television, I didn't know anything. And I was like, why is this hard for me? And I met a woman named Kelly Kolchak. Kelly Kolchak she ran Fox for a while. She put Malcolm in the Middle on the air. And then she became what's called a pod, an independent producer. And she partnered up with my manager, Ron, to start a company called Tagline Television. And at the time, I had just finished Foster Hall. And so Kelly had just taken over Tagline. So we met and we became friends and we started working together. And I said, I got an idea for a show. And I would pitch the idea for my show and she would say, that's not an idea. It's not a show. And I said, no, but I understand. I have a couple funny ideas. And she's like, there's no series there. There's no drive there. There's no characters there. And to her credit, honestly, anybody else would have been frustrated with a person who can't understand shit the way I couldn't understand stuff. So I said, well, I want to pitch this. And I would take out a show to pitch. And she'd say, okay, I don't think there's a show there, but let's go pitch it. You're funny and maybe you'll sell it in the room. And then I tried to pitch 2 things and I couldn't sell them. And everybody was really excited because I had just done this pilot that got a lot of attention. And I'd go into every room and they'd all be like, yeah, we're going to pass. And so I went to Kelly and I said, I don't understand this. I said, I'll write them on spec. I'll write these pilots myself. And then people will see the script just like they did with Foster Hall and they'll buy it. And then I'd write the scripts and Kelly would be like, there's no pilot. And I'd say, I don't understand it. And so she said, I remember it was 2005. I say, I don't understand it. She's like, well, let's just talk about it. Let's just figure it out. And she sat with me. She would sit with me as long as I wanted to and as much as I wanted to help me figure it out because she believed in me. She's like, I think you have a voice that many people don't have. And so we would spend, honestly, I'd say, what do you have available tomorrow? And she'd look at her calendar and she's like, I'm free from noon to 4:30. And I'd say, I'll be here at noon. And we would sit from noon to 4:30 in a conference room at Tagline and we would talk. We would talk about our lives. We would talk about our first boyfriend or girlfriend. We'd talk about our siblings. We'd talk about our parents. And then we would also talk about, she'd go, let's read the Friends pilot. We'd go off, read the Friends pilot. And she'd let's talk about the Friends pilot. What does Rachel want? What does Ross want? How does the first act break? What's the story moving forward? And we did this shit incessantly for probably a year and a half.
Wow. So she
was
broke
amazing.
down that entire world for you.
Broke down the entire process. More importantly, she would hear me, as we were just the shit talking about our lives, she would hear me describe my brother Eugene or describe my brother Danny or the twins, like any people in my life, tell stories about my father, and she would stop me and say, like, that's television. What you're talking about is character, and that's not on television. That's what all shows are about. I mean, basically, it's what she taught me is that Cheers is not about a bar, and Taxi's not about taxis, and Sopranos is not about the mafia. It's about those people. You could have set Cheers in a concession stand in a baseball stadium as long as I have those people, those characters. So it took me, I mean, it's a very hard, ethereal, kind of like, it's a nebulous concept to grasp, but that's what I learned in those 2 years. And then I got a call in 2007 from a guy named Sean Levy. Sean Levy directed the Night at the Museum movies. He's like one of the biggest, he's like an A-list director. And Sean at the time had a television deal at Fox. So he had a development person named J.J. Klein, a woman who read my pilot. And she showed it to Sean, who really liked it. So we took a meeting, and then me and Sean hit it off. He's like, let's do a show. And I wound up writing a pilot for Fox. I didn't work with Kelly, but it was the first time since I had been talking with Kelly for those 2 years or year and a half, where every time I'd say, I have a show, it's an idea about two brothers who run a wedding business. And she'd say, I don't care what they do, I care who they are. Don't tell me about the concept, tell me about the characters. You have to understand the characters. And if you can describe characters to me, and not using adjectives, but using anecdotes, don't tell me the way someone is, tell me what that person does, because that's what television's all about. It's about character, it's about action. She said, if you can do that, you're going to sell your pilots long before you even get to what the concept of the hook is.
Can you just break that part down real quick? I'm not sure if I follow.
Yeah, so if I say to you, perfect example is if I say, I'm going to do a show called Veep, and it's about a female vice president. That doesn't tell me anything. But if I tell you about Sabrina, if I tell you about that character that Julia Louis-Dreyfus plays, I think her name's Sabrina, forgive me if it's not, but like that character played by that actress, if you describe her, she's a bit of a misanthrope. She's kind of she uses a lot of foul language, wishes she was more important than she was. Like, all of those things are who the character is.
Right.
And if you describe that character beautifully, and the last thing you could say in your pitch is, oh, by the way, she's the vice president of the United States. Yes. As opposed to, because Veep is not about a female vice president. It's about this female vice president. Sopranos is not about the mafia. It's about Tony Soprano. It's about a guy who's having anxiety attacks and he has no place to go with it. Why does he have anxiety attacks? Because of his father. Because, like, it's all 100% character. So she taught me that. And she said, because I would have an idea about, fucking, this is a guy who runs a bed and breakfast. She's like, it doesn't matter what he does. It matters who he is. So then she would say, the thing that I learned is, like, don't give me adjectives, give me anecdotes. If I were to say, this guy is, I'll use an example from one of the things I did in that first pitch, which was basically, I had a character that was sisters, and one of them was named Tara, and Tara was needy. She was the needy sister, right? She always wanted attention. So in that pitch, if I said, and then there's Tara, and she's needy, it doesn't tell me anything. So Kelly would say, if you can tell me a story in that pitch about Tara that is funny, and it tells me who she is, instantly we'll know that character. So I rack my brain thinking about what a needy person would do. So in the pitch I would say, and then the third sister is Tara. Tara's the needy one. Tara's the one who at 15 years old staged her own abduction. And she locked herself in the closet. She locked herself in the attic with a bag of Doritos and a case of Tab and a bunch of Tiger Beat magazines while the FBI literally scoured around the house looking for clues. That's how much that girl craved attention. And I would tell that, and I brought it to Kelly, and Kelly's like, now I know who that girl is. Now I know where the comedy's going to come from. Now I understand, I see a glimpse into that character. So when she taught me that in those 18 months, I meet with Sean Levy, who says, I want to do a show called Date Night. It's a game night. It's about 3 couples that have a game night every Sunday. And I go into the rules in my head about Kelly. I'm like, I got to know who the characters are. And Sean's like, well, dude, we can fucking sell this. Because we had a bunch of funny ideas. I said, no, Sean, give me a week and let me think about this. And I went and I worked on 6 characters. And I had 3 couples.
3 couples, yeah.
And Sean's a brilliant salesman. Like I said, no, game night we wanted to do a show about marriage. I was like, I want to do a show about marriage and the honesty in marriage. Because at the time I was with Kathleen for 7 years. Sean with his wife for like 15 at the time or something. And I was like, no, you and I are sitting in this room, Sean. We're a couple of guys. After about an hour, I'd pretty much tell you anything I've ever thought. Like I would share all of my thoughts with you. I can't share all the thoughts with my wife. I just can't. And then he was like, what if we had a show about, we kind of came up with this idea. What if there's a show about 3 couples? One guy who's married for 10 years and he has a kid and his marriage is a shot. One guy who's married for 5 years, still in the honeymoon phase, no kids. And one guy who's engaged. They're three best friends from childhood. And the guy who's getting engaged realizes, I don't want to have a relationship like everybody else. I want to be completely honest with my wife. And then Sean's just a brilliant salesman. He was like, it's called The Institution. And I was like, oh, it's a great fucking title. So I said, before we pitch this, let me go develop the characters. I developed the characters. I come back a week later. We go into Fox, and I pitch the first three characters. And this woman named Susan Levinson, who's running comedy at the time, she stops me. She's like, I love this. I'm already in board. I love these characters. It was like, it really summed up exactly what Kelly had taught me. I don't need to know about the concept of the show, that this couple's here and this couple's there. Just tell me about the people. If I like the people, I'm going to watch the show.
Wow, that's truly amazing. And that you pretty much took that and made every pilot based off of that then after that?
Exactly. It's the rules that I have when I pitch. So after me and Sean wrote The Institution, and we did that, and I wrote that in October for him, or November, December, and then Christmas Day that year, Night at the Museum opened up. And Sean's life was never the same. He was like, he had a $500 million movie, and he was off to the races. So he went on, and then me and Kelly went out and sold. I went back to Tagline that next year. And then since then, I mean, for those 07, 08, 09, and 10, like me and Kelly together, as a producer and a writer, we sold a pilot or two every year. We got 2 on the air. We got a third one shot. Like, we did really, really well. And then 2-3 years ago, she went and started working at DreamWorks, and I took a deal at Universal, so I've been kind of on my own. We wrote a pilot together last year for CBS. It didn't get shot, though.
Right. So, Chris, what's life like now? What are you up to? What's going on there?
I have this show. We're waiting on Marlin. Marlin airs in August, and we'll see what happens there. We'll see if that gets a second season. But right now, I'm adapting a British property. It's a British TV show that I'm converting to for an American audience.
Nice.
I'm doing that with Universal now, but life is good, man. Listen, like you said earlier, like, to me, making it is that I get to do something creative and get paid for it. That's all I've ever wanted. I don't need a show to syndicate. I don't need to be recognized on the street as an actor. Like, if I can feed myself and Kathleen and I can have a roof over our heads because we're both being paid to do what we love, that's it. So life is great for us. We can't complain at all.
Do you have any advice for anybody out there aspiring to be an actor or writer or coming to LA and everything?
Yeah, I'm sure I do. I think what would be my one bit of advice? Honestly, I think your success is contingent upon how hard you're willing to work. I really do, because I think, like, unless you get here and you suddenly land on a TV show and it runs for a decade and now you have money, that's not going to happen for most people. So it's how hard you're willing to work, how much time you're willing to put in. And quite frankly, I didn't really come online until I was 30 years old when I started writing, and then I bought a house at 29 and I was like, I have to do something. And that's when I started working hard. The rest of the time, I was always on time for work. I learned my lines and I was good at what I did, but I wasn't really striving, or I wasn't being ambitious. The thing that I've discovered is, like, it's the phrase that I kind of came up with, which is that talent without ambition is like a bullet without a gun. And when you're just talented and you're not willing to push, you're just a bullet sitting on a counter. If you're willing to do it, now you have a way to propel yourself. That's where I landed, but it took me years to discover that. So I think if you're coming out here, if you want to be a writer, write. That's the thing. People go, I want to be a writer. What are you writing? And they go, well, I'm thinking about this. I have an idea about this. It's like, no, you just got to write. You got to write incessantly, and you got to write aggressively, and it sucks. Writing sucks. It's never fun. It's never easy. And I think people think, oh yeah, the guy who's written as much as someone like I've written, it's like, oh, it must be easy or fun to write, and it never is. It sucks every time.
Do you ever hear of anything called flow state? Like, you're just in the zone. Do you do anything to get yourself in that writing mode?
No, I don't know. I've never suffered from flow state. I have
not like suffering. Like, it's like a good thing.
No,
like, you're in the zone.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
I haven't had the luxury of ever being in a place that I call flow state. To me, it's like going to the gym. I don't like going to the gym. I like having gone to the gym. And the harder I work at the gym, the better I feel on the other side of it. But no, I don't get to a place where it's like, I think it's like television or writing or any creative endeavor. I can't say any, because I think it's different for different people. Because I know there are people that are prolific, and I know there are people that get into flow state. I've read every book about the Beatles and all the great rock stars in the 70s, and some people just had this magic kind of drive inside them. But for me, my experience with television or producing or writing something is that it's like 3% inspiration, excited idea, and 97% digging a ditch. You gotta like start hacking it out. And then at the other side of it, when you get to see it, like, I did a show called Man Up on ABC in like 2011. It's been 6 years. I haven't watched it. And then me and Kathleen stumbled upon an episode like a few months ago, and it was brand new to me. I was like, holy shit. Cool. I didn't remember writing any of this, and we're laughing, and I was like, that was kind of magical for me. I was like, that's kind of great that I get to look back at that and experience it. But in the time, it's like, you're digging a ditch. I'd love to find flow state. I'd love to figure it out. I'm sure I think my brain goes too fast to ever kind of find flow state. I'm always kind of in this manic kind of thinking mode.
Yeah.
What is forgive me because I haven't listened to your podcast. I didn't know you had a podcast until you called me.
Yeah.
Podcast. What is the theme of your podcast?
So pretty much I just bring people on with amazing life stories, people that have been through some shit and they've made their lives beautiful again. And I have my story on as the first episode. You can give it to a listen after that. I brought a girl on that I met at a grocery store parking lot. I became good friends with her. We talked about the law of attraction. I brought on Maura and Jay, any type of healers. Anybody that's got anything good to say and is inspired and they love what they're doing are more than welcome to come on, because I feel like in today's world, you don't get enough of that with all the bullshit on television and all that stuff. Like, I don't know. I think just seeing what inspires people to do what they love and just taking it from there. And it's nice to have a one-on-one conversation with no cell phones, nothing. It's just you and that other person. You have their complete attention and you learn something. Like when you broke down that aspect of diving into characters of like, it's not what they are, it's who they are. That I completely resonated with that and got that. And that was pretty mind-blowing to me.
Oh, good.
So,
good.
I mean, it's just stuff like that. It's just little stuff you pick up on, and everybody's got a story.
Oh, yeah. I agree.
That's pretty much it. But
all right, cool. Very good. Well, I appreciate it, man. If you ever need anything, let me know.
Absolutely, Chris. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure, man. My pleasure. Always. Right. How's the business?
Business is good. So it's getting busier every week, so I'm enjoying it.
Is Kristen working with you?
Kristen, she will be working with me probably January 1st, around there.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. I was just talking to her last weekend at the wedding, so.
Oh, that's right. You guys had a good time, huh?
Yeah, that was fun.
That's awesome.
All right, Chris.
All right, man.
Thanks for coming on.
I appreciate it, Kev. No problem.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. My private practice is located in New Jersey at Montclair Upper Cervical Chiropractic. If you have any additional questions about today's podcast, other episodes, or any questions about Blair Upper Cervical Chiropractic in general, feel free to visit my website at drkevinpecca.com or subscribe to my YouTube channel at Dr. Kevin Pecca. Hope you enjoyed the show. Cheers.